Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started with this here. So, kind of the history of heredity and the study of it really started with Gregor Mendel, who was this Austrian monk from back in the mid 1800s. And it was kind of his theory of genetic inheritance that he really came up with studying peas and how traits, certain physical traits of peas came about. And so a couple of those things that came about were kind of how traits are passed down from parents to offspring, right? How each parent can carry two distinct units. What do we call those? Alleles, right? Yeah, so those are the alleles, okay? And then during fertilization, only one of those distinct units is passed on from each parent, right? And then those come together to create the new two distinct alleles that the offspring has, right? And so, yeah, so that's just a little bit of the background there. So a little bit of the terminology that I want you to be familiar with. You don't necessarily have to read all these things to you, but I'll kind of point out a couple. This idea of dominant versus recessive alleles. We'll talk about this a lot today, but this idea of a dominant allele this is denoted by a capital letter when we're looking at those Punnett squares, right? And we only need one of them for it to show its effect or to show its phenotype, right? So with those two below, when we see genotype, that's like we would express that in the letters that we're going to talk about, the letters of the alleles, the capital or the lowercase, right? So that's like the genetic makeup. And then the phenotype is how it actually looks, like how it's expressed or how it comes out in the individual, right? So for the dominant trait, we only need one for it to show up in the phenotype. With the recessive trait, we need two to show up in the phenotype. Okay. And then if an individual has two of the same allele, so two of the dominant ones, two of the recessive ones, we would say that an individual is homozygous for that trait. Okay. If they have one dominant, one recessive, then it'd be heterozygous in that case. Okay. So, all right. Questions so far? Okay, so some of the basics here. One idea is called the principle of segregation. Okay, so again, during fertilization, each parent passes on only one of their alleles for that trait. So their two alleles are segregated across and only one gets passed down. And we've kind of just talked about this dominant recessive inheritance, right? Certain traits are passed via dominant alleles, where only one allele is needed to express that trait. But then others are passed via recessive alleles, where we need both to have that trait show up. And then we'll talk about some variations outside of that as well. And so how many people have done Punnett squares before in high school biology or another biology class here? Yeah, pretty much everybody. Okay, so we'll be doing some of those today. This is the kind of easiest way when we have this kind of simple inheritance of this dominant recessive type of inheritance. Easiest way to figure out the probability that each offspring will have a certain trait. And so we'll work through a bunch of those examples today. Okay, everybody got that? Looks like it. Okay, so this is just an example, a table with a bunch of examples of either dominant traits or recessive traits here. And yeah, you can see some of those there. You don't have to memorize this in any way. When you do problems related to these types of traits, I'll tell you whether it's dominant or recessive. You don't have to memorize which ones are dominant, which ones are recessive. I'll tell you that, but you do need to know what to do with it once you know that it's dominant or recessive. And so let's start working through a couple of examples. So our first example is Huntington's disease. So Huntington's disease is a disease that results in death sometime in the 20s typically, and people's brain degenerates, and it's a very terrible genetic disorder that has carried on in the genome because of the fact that a lot of times people don't know they have it until sometimes they're in their mid to late 20s, and maybe they've already produced offspring at that point. So it's a dominant trait, right? Meaning that you only need one of the capital letters to express it. So if we have, this is two different examples here, right? So first example is one of the parents has Huntington's disease. and then the other doesn't, right? And then the other example would be both parents have Huntington's disease. They're both heterozygous for Huntington's disease. Heterozygous, meaning that they have one dominant, one recessive, but because it's dominant, they still express that. So go ahead and just with the people around you, between the four of you, I'm sure one of you remembers how to do this. So go ahead and just fill that out. And then, yeah, and then for on your clickers, go ahead and send in the answer to number 2 here, which I'll set it up so you can only send a number in. And you'll kind of see how to do that, but you might have to, you'll go down to the bottom, you'll scroll through the numbers, and then you can go to the right and add another digit, and then you can hit the send button. I don't have it turned on yet, but you'll see how to do that in just a sec, and I can help you with that.
Like the percent?
Yeah. Yeah, and you can do it in the whole number format, the percent. So not in the decimal form, but in the whole number form.
So for just for this one, right?
The second one, the one that I circled.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's
Okay. Yeah, no worries. Yeah. Figuring it out. Any clickers there? There you go. Nice. Figured it out? Nice.
And we just press send.
Myoglobin?
Yeah.
Nice. In what class?
Advanced biochem.
Oh, nice. You're in there right now. Wow. Yeah.
So they're in the muscles and then they would receive the oxygen from the
From the hemoglobin,
They
yeah.
hold it tight here.
A much stronger affinity, yeah. Yeah, that's cool. You're,
It's interesting. I didn't actually know about it until today.
Yeah.
I didn't realize this.
yeah. That's one of the training adaptations with endurance training too, is building up more myoglobin in
Oh,
your
you can-
muscle cells.
You can make it so your body can do something.
Yeah, yeah.
And would that like when you do anaerobic stuff
Or aerobic, yeah.
or
Yeah,
aerobic?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
aerobic.
Yeah.
With.
Yeah.
So the more
The more like, yeah, more intense endurance training you do, the more myoglobin you'll get, yeah.
is that also why you can like get better at breath holding? Because you would
Um,
increase.
That might have something to do with it. One of the factors, yeah.
That's the thing.
All right, go ahead and send that in. You can hit the send button there. Make sure you hit send on your clicker. With this type of question, you've always got to use send. Wow, most of you did it. Good job. All right, so we got 44 of you that sent something in. Everybody just hit send real quick. I think we have 47 of you here at least, it looks like. So never had more than 4. There it is, 46. That's pretty good. Okay. All right, we almost got everybody there. Okay, and 85% of you are saying 75, and then there's another 9% of you that are saying 0.75, so in the decimal format. But yeah, so let's walk through that. So we would fill it out like this, right? Fill out those. So what would be our percentage or our probability there in number 1? 50%, yeah, because this one and this one, so it's just 2 out of 4, right, is the way you would do that. That's 50%, okay? And then this one here, all right, so this one we've got 3 out of 4, right? We got all 3 of these, which would be 3 out of 4, which you guys said would be 75. Okay. And as you might remember, this is the probability is new with every new offspring, right? So it's not that if you had 4 kids, they would look like this, right? It's that's the difference between prevalence and probability, right? What actually comes out doesn't necessarily match probability, but probability is kind of chances of getting a certain phenotype each time and genotype, but that kind of resets with every new offspring. Okay. Other questions on that? Okay, so then another one with the recessive trait now, albinism. Go ahead and again calculate those and send in the answer for number 2 there. It was a recessive trait now, not a dominant trait. Albinism is lacking certain proteins that give the skin its color.
Yeah.
Why are you in biochem right now? That's early on.
Bio major.
Oh, you're a biomedic. I didn't realize that. Okay, gotcha.
Actually, I'm hoping to go to PA school maybe.
Okay,
So,
cool.
yeah, we'll see.
Yeah,
But
all right.
I got my UT cert and trying to figure out my action back there.
Okay, cool. Nice. Yeah, sweet. So I was,
A couple of the PA classes.
I teach the physiology course. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, teaching her this semester. So yeah, good. Yeah, there's some chats. They accept 34 each year. So
34.
yeah, out of the 2,500 that apply.
I know. I was like,
Yeah, less than that. Yeah, it's a lot. Very good. All right, go ahead and send it in if you haven't yet. Make sure to hit that send button again. All right, about 10 more of you need to send it in. Hit the send button on your clicker. All right, I'll leave it open for a sec. There's still about 7 more of you that haven't sent it yet. Again, just hit the send button just to make sure. But let's walk through it here. So again, this is a recessive trait, meaning that we've got to have both of the recessive alleles to express the trait. And so if we have one parent that's homozygous dominant, meaning none of those recessive alleles, and then one that we would call a carrier, right? They don't have albinism, but they could potentially give that allele, the recessive allele, to an offspring that they produce. And so here we've got what percent chance here? 0, right? No percent, because we have to be able to have the recessive allele from both parents to have this expressed, right? So then on the other side, if we've got one parent with albinism, the other one as a carrier, then we have the possibility here, and most of you said 50% chance, right? So we've got both of these would be the ones that would potentially have albinism. And so, yeah, 50% chance there. Okay, questions on that one at all? Okay. All right, well, let's keep going then. One of the principles of Mendelian genetics from that Gregor Mendel is called independent assortment. Okay, and so with the principle of independent assortment, um, it pretty much means that each allele is independent from the other allele. So meaning that just because an allele from one parent is passed down doesn't mean that all of the alleles from that same parent are going to be passed down, right? So some will come from one side of the family, whereas some come from the other side of the family. Another practical way to say it would be just because you got your eye color from your dad doesn't mean that you're going to get your that you can't get your hair color from your mom's side, right? So kind of this independent assortment. Okay, so some examples of this would be here. So here we'll look at 2 separate traits, both related to the eyes, right? So one being eye color and the other one being vision. Okay, so brown eyes are dominant, and so brown eyes are expressed with a capital B over blue eyes, which would be recessive. Blue eyes are really just kind of lacking that protein that gives the eyes their color. And then farsightedness is dominant over normal vision, being recessive. Okay, and so what we can do here is we can, first of all, calculate the probability of each trait. Okay, and so you can go ahead and do that with each of these. And I want you to send this one in on your clickers here. What's the likelihood of having an offspring with blue eyes in this case? Okay, and then I want you to go ahead and put the numbers down here, right, of each one, of each genotype. And then if you're done with that and we haven't gone on yet, you can start filling this out, right? Then we're going to combine probability of each of them. Okay, so first one, you're just answering the question about the probability of the eye color only. But then here, we're going to answer the question of both. What's the likelihood of having a blue-eyed kid with normal vision, right? So at that point, we're going to multiply those fractions together. Okay, but let's just start with the first part. Go ahead and fill that out, and you're gonna send in the answer to that bottom one there, the offspring with blue eyes. Check with the people on your team, make sure everybody's getting this and understanding what they're supposed to do here.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, wait. Oh, wait, I accidentally did.
Or, yeah, yeah.
That's what things that you have. You have brown.
All right, so go ahead and send in this first one here, likelihood of a blue-eyed kid. All right, still about 10 more of you need to send that in. All right, I'll leave it open for a sec, but most of you are sending that in, and it looks like about 80% of you are saying, about 85% of you are saying 25 is our percentage there. Okay, so a quarter of them. So let's walk through the farsightedness versus normal vision one first. Right, so we would fill it out like this. Okay, and then we would fill out the colored one like this, right? And so then we could fill out that bottom part, because that bottom part's going to help us with the next page. Okay, but as far as the blue eyes go, it's just this one here, right? So that's the 25% that most of you said. Okay, then we would fill out all of the genotypes on the bottom, right? So all the genotypes are down there on the bottom. So we'd have all of those, something out of 4. Okay. Any questions on any of this right here before we go to the next one? Okay, so the 25% was the answer to the one on the clicker there. Okay, and then, yeah, and then we'll go to the next one. Oh yeah, sorry. Next one there, the last one's a 1. And then the next one here is where we multiply fractions. Okay, so multiplying fractions sounds scary, but it's not, right? You just multiply straight across, right? So the bottom number is always going to be 16 because we're going 4 times 4, right? And then that top number, just multiply the numerator by the numerator, okay? And that'll be your top number there. So fill this whole thing out. And so this is all of the genotypes that we're trying to figure out, right? And then we need to kind of convert that to phenotype, right? So which of these means farsightedness and brown eyes, right? Which of these means farsightedness and blue eyes, okay? And so just do that for each of them. You can put in the total number out of 16, and then you got your percentages there. You're going to calculate that. And then again, this will be the one that you send in on your clickers to me. And I hadn't reset it yet. So if you just send it in, try it again one more time. But yeah, so go ahead and work through that with the people on your team. Please turn and make sure everybody's on the same page. Just because you get it doesn't mean everybody does. So help each other out.
You guys get 0, 1, 2, 0,
Again, or like more fraction?
Percent, yeah. Yeah, send the actual whole number, percentage. You can do a decimal. I can't remember if you need to for this one. Do you need to for this one? A decimal?
So.
Yeah, you haven't got there yet, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can do a decimal in the clicker if you want.
Or 12.5.
Oh, was it anything even as big as it? Yeah, this is the only action.
So for,
And then capital F right here. So like a circular dot.
Like way more than that. That would be one capital. And I got stuck right
Okay,
there.
all right. So yeah, so now you've got to translate genotype to phenotype, right? So it's really the question of like, what does this mean, right? So if there's one capital F, that means that they're farsighted, right? So we got this one is farsighted, and if there's one capital B, they have brown eyes, right? So these two have brown eyes and they're farsighted, right? So you just do that for each of them, right? Maybe just right next to it, like what the phenotype would be, and then you add those up to put them there.
I know, I forgot. So because
This is. Yeah, or there's a one, yeah. Oh, no, yes.
So the one you're sending in is the one in the very bottom right here, right? The normal vision and blue eyes. Both of the recessive traits. It's a bummer that normal vision is recessive, huh?
Yeah, not.
Oh, brown eyes.
Yeah. Down one. Okay.
I got this.
I've never known business.
I'll have you guys send in like words and phrases later on too, so if you can. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah. When I used to do tests on paper, I would do all those hybrid ones with the clickers, and it was kind of stressful. The students didn't like it because they're like, yeah, that's the problem. They're putting in like 90 different things, and it was just like, it was not good. Yeah, Canvas is much better for that. All right, go ahead and send that in if you haven't. I think there's about 10 more of you. Make sure you're hitting that send button. All right, let's start walking through this. I'll leave it open on the clicker so you can still send it in. But so yeah, I'll just kind of undo all of this. This is the stuff you had from the previous page, right? At least the stuff on the left. And then you just had to do the multiplication. So you just multiplying straight across, right? And then maybe the new part is translating this, each of these genotypes, right? These are the genotypes to phenotypes, which would be how it actually looks, right? How it's expressed. And so we just have to decide what's what, right? So if we have a capital F, then we've got farsightedness for sure. If we have a capital B, then we've got brown eyes, right? So this one would be, right, farsighted and brown, right? So you'd want to kind of do that with each of them, right? And then add up all of those that are farsighted and brown, right? Add up all those that are farsighted and blue, normal and brown, right? So it's kind of that conversion of genotype to phenotype, right? So then when you do that, you've got 6 out of 16 having farsighted and brown eyes. You've got 2 out of 16 farsighted and blue eyes, 6 out of 16 normal vision and brown eyes, and then again 2 out of 16 there. And then those percentages, if you just do the calculations, it's either going to be 37.5 or 12.5. So it looks like about a third of you, 60%-ish, put the 12.5, okay? And then others put 0.125. So yeah, so that's the right answer there on your clickers, would be 2 out of 16 there. And I typically always, with these types of questions, I'll ask you to send in the percentage, or in Canvas, you can just do numerical questions where you just type the actual number in, right? So you just would type 12.5. So things like that. But yeah, that's the process there. So questions about that? So these are always questions you have to work out, right? I mean, most people can't just look at it and answer it, right? You usually have to do the work and kind of write everything out. Definitely need scratch paper for these types of questions usually. So yeah, any questions about any of that? Okay, did everybody send it in? Just hit send one more time. I think we're still missing 2 more people. It's there. You just kind of keep scrolling like past the 0, I think. Yeah. And just send in anything at this point, just so you get the point percentage in. Just hit the send button. Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of the simple version of dominant and recessive. Okay. And now there's a couple kind of aberrations to that we'll talk about. Okay. So one of those aberrations to that's called codominance. And codominance is different than normal dominant recessive. This is where two different alleles show their effect, even though only one copy is present. Okay. So it's like both of them are dominant in a way, right? Even though you only need one of them, but they both show up in the phenotype still. Okay. So each allele is distinctly expressed. It's not a blending of the two, but you actually see both traits. Okay. But inheritance is still affected or passed on distinctly as units. Okay. So one example of that is our blood types. Okay. So this is the whole AB blood typing that we have in our blood. Okay. So the way this one is expressed is with this I. Okay. And then it has an A on there or a B on there. And so if we've got IA and IB, that means that person's going to have AB blood, right? They're going to have both of them. You're going to see both the A and the B show up. Okay. So if we've got, we won't bring in O blood yet. We'll talk about that one in a second. But yeah, so if we have a mother with AB blood and a father with AB blood, this would be our example there. So go ahead and fill that out. Again, fill out the genotype, the phenotype, and then again, send in your answer there to that one on your clickers.
Do the rest of the eyes like that, or can we just do like B and A?
It doesn't matter,
So I
whatever,
could just do B
however
and A?
you do it, yeah,
Okay.
whatever makes sense to you. You just have to be able to know, like, to recognize it when you see it that way.
Okay,
Yeah.
just knowing that that's blood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see what I had to tell you. I know, we get. I know. No, I've never got pilot. I know.
Really? And I never got.
But it's like, it's.
I know, right? It is going fast already. It's already what, 1/5 of the way through the semester. All right, go ahead and send it in if you haven't there. All right, let's walk through what it looks like. The clicker thing's still open, so you can still send it in, but let's walk through it there. It's not working. There we go. Yeah, so I didn't have those right in, but we've just got one as the AA one, which would be this one here, right? This would be AA, right? AB, we've got half of them there, so that would be here and here, right? And then one possibility of BB, which would produce type B blood, right? So then we translate that to the phenotypes, right? So we'll have one type A blood, one type B blood, and then two AB blood. So the likelihood of the AB blood, which is what about 80% of you put, which is 50%. Okay, so 50% there for that one. Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
Write them like the.
Yeah, you should write it that way. I was just being lazy when I was writing it. Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, whatever, you just need to be able to recognize that the IA means that. But yeah. Okay, other questions on that? Okay. All right, so let's go on to another kind of aberration of the normal dominant recessive inheritance, which would be incomplete dominance. Okay, and so this one's a little bit unique because it doesn't, it's more of a blending of the traits instead of each trait showing up individually or one just not showing up. It's kind of a middle ground. Okay, and so heterozygous individuals or organisms show a phenotype that's not either, it's somewhere in the middle. Okay, and yeah, and so one example of that is sickle cell anemia. Okay, so sickle cell anemia is shows up. So the way we do it is with the hemoglobin gene like this. Okay, so normal hemoglobin is when we would have the A on that hemoglobin gene on the H. Okay, but problem with sickle cell anemia is under low oxygen conditions, the hemoglobin crystallizes and becomes like these hard rods, and it makes the red blood cells turn into these sickle shaped, kind of like this half moon shaped thing because there's these hard proteins in there that have crystallized. Okay, extremely painful and debilitating genetic disorder. But the sickle cell trait isn't quite that. Okay, sickle cell trait is when we have one with hemoglobin A, so normal, and then one with hemoglobin S for the sickle cell. Okay, and so it's somewhere in the middle. It actually is protective against malaria. And so there's kind of some of these protective benefits of having the sickle cell trait. It doesn't lead to full sickle cell anemia. It's somewhere in the middle. And so, yeah, so we'll do an example like this. So if you have two parents that both have sickle cell trait, that's the genotype. And then we can go ahead and fill out the table on the next slide using those two parents there. And again, answer that question there. And you got three different phenotypes now, right? Normal sickle cell trait versus sickle cell anemia.
Oh, oh wait, that's maybe a different question. Do you include the one who has it in the people who have the trait?
So there's three different phenotypes instead of two. So this one, there's normal, trait, and anemia. So,
Okay, so you differentiate whether they have the trait or the actual.
because they show up totally differently, yeah. So that's kind of the idea here is a one-to-one matching of phenotype and genotype, like there's, yeah. Yeah.
You know, which one's the way that is? Thank you.
Sure.
Which one you're right first? So they're both dominant, right?
Yeah, so it's a different type of dominance, right? It's that incomplete dominance. So you just, yeah, it doesn't matter which one you write first, as long as they're both represented there. Yeah. Mhm. All right, so send in that number here. All right. Few more of you need to send it in. I'll leave it open for a sec. About 3/4 of you are saying 50%. Actually, most of you are saying 50%. So let's look at that. So if we do it, it looks pretty much like this. All right, so this one would have normal. That would be the normal phenotype, right? This would be sickle cell trait, right, with one of them, but not the other, okay? This one's also sickle cell trait, right? And then this one would be sickle cell anemia, right? So we've got 1, 2, and 1. Okay, so the ones that would have sickle cell trait will be the 50% there, right? So, okay, so you see how there's three different possible phenotypes instead of two. Most of the time there's just two, right? Most of the time it's either the dominant one shows up or the recessive one shows up. This one, there's a middle ground in the middle where it's different from the other two. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, then our last example of something that's different from the typical dominant recessive inheritance is called multiple alleles. Okay, so this would be where we have more than just dominant and recessive. There could be a third or more possibilities. Okay, and this is actually how it is for most traits, right? Each parent can still only have the two alleles, but there's more than those two options. Okay, so with blood type, this is a perfect example. So we already talked about the I with the A on it, the I with the B on it. The third option is a lowercase I, which is how O blood shows up, right? So that doesn't result in having an antigen on the red blood cells. And so this is kind of a table that shows you how we get from genotype to phenotype, right? So you can refer back to that one in a second, that table if you want to translate the genotype that you find to the phenotype, okay? And so let's go ahead and do this one. This will be our last calculation that you do, problem that you do. So we've got a mother with type A blood, but with this genotype, and a father with type B blood with this genotype. Okay, go ahead and calculate that, figure it out, and send in the answer to the likelihood of O blood. We're still not talking about the RH factor, right? The positive or the negative, but the other ones are represented here.
Those are. It's not great. Great. Yeah, not that.
All right, about 10 more of you, go ahead and send it in. All right, I'll leave it open for a sec for the few of you that still need to send it in. But it looks like most of you are saying 25% there. So let's take a look at how you'd fill that out. So we're going right to genotype there. There's going to be none with two A's, right? One with A and B, one with just A, none with two B's, one with just B, and then one with O blood, right? So this would be the genotype for O blood, right? So we'll have one of each, right? So 25% would be the answer for likelihood of O blood. So the ones with a double lowercase I. Okay, questions about that one? Okay, then lastly, this is a simple version of genetics, right? This isn't actually how most genes are passed down. It is how some genes are passed down. The ones we talked about today are definitely all true, but most traits are expressed by more than one gene. Okay, and so that might seem as simple as hair color, skin color, height, those are all multiple genes coming together to kind of express those traits. And then other things are even more complicated, like the prevalence, or not the prevalence, but your risk of type 2 diabetes or cardiovascular disease. They found somewhere around 50 linked genes to each of those diseases, right? So then it's even a combination of genetics and environment coming together, right? So most things are that way, like intelligence and all these things that people might like to try to get a hold of and try to like create the perfect kid or something like that, right? We're very far from figuring that out. But yeah, so there are definitely some things that are simple, like what we've done today, but most things are much more complicated than that, with many genes coming together. So yeah, that's it for today, guys. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you guys on Friday for the exam. Don't forget your computers. Don't forget to charge them. Come early and pet Betsy.